If you, like me, are a fan of fantasy CSGO, then check out eliteduels.com and draft your team now. You earn points based off of kills and assists, but you also lose points based on deaths. So make sure you choose your players wisely. You can use the code DUELS, that is DUELS, when you deposit, and you can earn $5 free. Check it out, eliteduels.com. Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome back to the podcast. On this one, I sat down with Chad Spunj Burchill. And if you're a fan of Chad, I think you'll enjoy this one. We spoke about a large degree of topics. We varied quite a bit. We went from, observing and, the state of CS, the economy and storylines and being an analyst, how it is now, what it can be like in the future, what are the issues that we want to kind of fix. And interestingly, especially with the observing thing, this was actually right before the point Sliggy had been flown in. We didn't know about it at that point in time. And in the background, you'll hear G2 versus Mousesports, I believe. It was day 2 of the Legends phase. There was nowhere else I could record this because it was during a very long day and it was during the only kind of break that we both shared in that day. So we both sort of had to pay attention to what was going on. So if you didn't like the ambience, I apologize. I listened back to it. I think it sounds fine. So I hope you guys enjoy that. We also get a little bit personal towards the end where we talk about Chad's move to Malta. We talk about what he's doing to improve himself and how he's thinking about that, and also some of the things that he struggles with. And Chad is such a great guy to talk to and shoot the shit with because he's so genuine and sincere. So I hope you guys enjoy that. It's more of a personal look into who he is. Now, as far as any updates go, we just had the Elite podcast released, and that was a big hit, I would say. I mean, I didn't get an enormous degree of viewership, versus the classic kind of, I think, what you could expect on YouTube on a very popular channel, like between 30 and 60k views or something. But we got something like, I think it was 3. Right now, it's like 3 to 4k on all of the podcast platforms, and on YouTube it's around 1k. So that's not too bad for me, as far as like my kind of metrics go. It's pretty decent, and I expect that to grow all the time. These kinds of episodes, I think, are supremely popular. I think there's a lot of people that would really enjoy them but just don't know about them. So I expect that a lot of people go back to some of these, and I will be trying to do a lot more of these because this is really the things that I really personally enjoy the most, is getting into the minds of the players and asking them these kind of deeper questions about performance and what they're dealing with and the struggles that they have had and how they're fixing those and the things that they're thinking about. I think that's supremely fascinating, and I think the more that I do this, the more I'll get a reputation for it, and the more players that will come forward or want to come forward or will have a positive reception to me asking them to do it and have more confidence in me. So and that actually already happened. I had a couple people that are interested to come on that I think you guys would really like to hear from. So I've got more stuff like that in the pipeline. And in terms of what's going on right now, as far as like where I am, I'm actually at Blast. I'm in Moscow right now. The event is a 2 or 3 days out. I'm here a little bit early because I came from the major, and I'm not sure if I get many opportunities to record with any of the players here because the schedules are typically quite tight, but I'll see what I can do. But without further ado, I present to you Chad Spunj Burchill. And we're recording. So I'm here at the major, it's day 2. I'm here with Chad, Burchill, Mr. Spunj. You've ordered some ice for Woxic. What the hell's going on?
I thought Christmas came early this year, but unfortunately Mr. Woxic's having a few issues with his Sensei Raw, and I thought if I order him 2 more, maybe we can avoid those delays. We're about to witness Jax potentially get this ace here on the piss. Oh, that sucks. That would have been cool. Jax is playing out of his skin this tournament. Do you know what this feels like, this setup we have right now? It's kind of like we're commentating a cricket match. You know how you're up and you're looking down at everything?
It's actually pretty awesome, and we're like in the darkness here right at the top, so no one can even see what we're doing. Although don't get
the creepy vibes there, of course. We do have Matt to the left of us, so we need to be safe.
So it's been an interesting tournament so far with a huge amount of I would say extremely unexpected upsets. The fact that Dream Eaters have picked up a couple of maps. Obviously, Vitality are a team that we know that despite their ranking and despite their incredible ceiling and potential, they don't always take every game seriously, and you start to wonder when stuff like this happens, where they should clearly just 3-0 blitz everybody at this stage of the major. Like, is that actually a problem then? Are they a bit immature in terms of how they handle their own team mentality and culture?
Well, look, some of the problems that I have with Vitality is that when you look how quickly they got to the second position in the world, you have to think, have they accelerated their process, not just because of themselves or because other teams have dropped off in the rankings, and Astralis definitely did so. They didn't attend a lot of the tournaments that the guys from Vitality were at, and that kind of helped them get further up the rankings. As well, it doesn't feel like there are teams on the same level of Liquid, Astralis, and Na'Vi, and I know that Astralis has never returned to the same form that they were in previously, but it feels like it's still possible. Whereas Na'Vi as well also have that unbreakable will of Simple Electronic in there, and now hopefully with Blade and all the Boomich, all the new guys, that they can continue in that direction. But Vitality, I don't know, it's such a unique one because they do have somebody so good. ZywOo should be enough for them to be able to build a system around, you'd hope.
It is a really interesting conundrum, especially when it feels like we've been teased because we had French Counter-Strike really disappearing for a very long time. As I say that, it's interesting because we are looking down at G2 playing mousesports, which we'll get into in a moment because we touched on it with the Woxic situation, but obviously there's more to be said on that. But ultimately we've been looking for a French team to really do something with all the skill they've had, but it seems like part of the French scene. It's interesting because if we look at the most dominant scenes, you think about the French scene, you think about the Swedish scene, and you think about the North American scene, in the later years more so, and it felt like everyone was making a big joke of North America and their culture. But then everything in the last couple of years kind of turned on its head, and we look at Sweden, and they have their own issues with culture, and they have their own issues with stagnancy. And you look at the French scene, and they have their own issues with infighting in teams and just general drama and so on, and everyone just kind of backstabbing each other and creating this really weird environment. But also at the same time, it tends to be the case that French players don't often play outside of French teams. So Vitality, they're a great prospect, but do you see them going all the way, or is it going to be kind of like that FaZe story where they get so close like FaZe did at the Boston Major and then they just never capture the greatness that we know that they had?
It's at the moment, it's the same as what we had last year, right? It's hard to see anybody being better than Liquid in their current form. And with Vitality ranked number 2 and how that could be partially inflated, will they reach the form of being the ultimate number 1 team in the world? That's a really tough one. With this roster, probably not, right? Because there's too many members who don't show up from match to match. I'm not saying the same members don't show up from match to match, but that changing hands could be a bit of a problem for them going forward. It's not that Vitality as a team don't have the right ideas, because ever since Alex has come in and their approach to the game, you can see it getting added, week after week, tournament after tournament. When ZywOo is able to be at his peak and everybody else is able to keep up, they look very scary. But I think for them to truly be the best Vitality, maybe 1 or 2 roster changes. I'm not saying take anybody from G2 who we're watching right now. I think there's more talent within the French scene who you can look towards. A roster change here, a roster change there. Upgrading some personnel, continuing with the system, continuing with Alex in-game leading because I like what he brings, and then they could be on the right track. So maybe not this version of Vitality, but maybe a version of Vitality within the next 6 months.
There are so many interesting challenges when you look at a team like Vitality where they are a team that, if for all the reasons that you kind of highlighted, they have everything that it takes on the server to be the best team in the world, to play the best Counter-Strike, but there's so much more than just playing the best Counter-Strike to be the best team in the world. Yeah. And I think that one really interesting thing we've seen with Liquid, and we saw previously with the Astralis era, is that both of those teams, what they have in common is that they are complete in the terms of they have a great culture to the team. They have a great mixture of personalities. So the team chemistry is not just, the players get along very well, but the chemistry in the game also works in terms of having a good balance of emotion. We have a really professional take on how to actually approach the game, which was sort of innovated originally by Astralis, how you should go about that, managing time off and then managing your practice, managing your preparation, and not just that, but also just this mentality that you should just decimate everyone at every single opportunity, and that's what it is to be great, which, again, I think that's kind of what we led in here with Vitality. That's something that they've shown that they're lacking right now. And so this is what it takes now to be the best. You have to be complete. And if you look at Vitality, do you see a big leak in one of those areas? Is it like multiple areas?
I think it's just the individual skill ceiling of some of the players. I think in terms of the structure behind them, Vitality, a great organization. The manager that they brought in for the team is an ex-Olympian, right? So he is going to be able to help them with a lot of the mental side of things, preparation, being ready, also the fitness side. He was was he doing the canoes? I forget anyway, but he was doing something which is more than going to force these guys to be active. Absolutely. I saw them doing stretches and stuff at their boot camps and all those bits and pieces, which are all parts that need to be a part of a team in 2019. The problem is, I think that Counter-Strike is a marathon. We're at a tournament right now. If you win, cool, you win. But in a couple weeks after that, guess what? You have another tournament, and we want you to be just as good at that tournament as you were at the major, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So what we look for in Counter-Strike, I don't know if you're the same, but I think just across the board, it feels like the general consensus from people is if you can be consistent for like a 6-month period of time, then you're legit. But you have to prove that you're consistent for a 6-month period of time. And then it's so arbitrary because we have teams who don't go to certain events, aren't always competing against each other. Maybe they don't value that event as much as you do. For example, Summit. Vitality won that event, but we know that Ants and Liquid wouldn't have weighted that event as highly as the ECS finals, for example. So those bits and pieces are going to play into every single team. And unfortunately, with the structure that we have, we're never going to get every single team looking at the goal in the same way. We're only going to get a handful. And that handful of teams, Vitality should be in right now, but they have to be shaken. What do you make of changing shirts after losing an opening match? Like Superstition on day one of the major, when you lost like that, surely that doesn't come into play.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't bode all that well. I completely agree. I mean, if you're a simple, then you get to be as superstitious as you want, but obviously that's not quite the case here in this instance. And I think it's really interesting because I think, as you say, like you're talking about this consistency, this is such a great topic because I think I listened to a podcast a long time ago where Gary Kasparov was, for those of you who don't know, like the greatest chess player of all time, really. He was talking about this idea of what greatness is and what being the champion is, what being the best in the world actually is, because it's very different to being someone chasing greatness who's never experienced it before. That's the easy route to hunger, like
sure.
Having that hunger, having that extra drive and focus and commitment and everything it takes to become the best. But as soon as you become the best, I think actually Kirby, we saw kind of revealed in that interview, he basically achieved too much too soon, and his hunger was completely sapped. And he's such a young player as well that I think that he was not equipped to deal with that. I think we see it in him. And staying on top is also different when you're not chasing anymore. You don't have that guy that you can look at him, you can look at their faces, you know what they are, you can study their demos. That's a completely different beast to then better yourself and live within greatness as opposed to chasing greatness and then achieving it for just a flash.
Yeah, I can get behind that one for sure. When you look at our structure compared to a football season, right? You play the entire football season, you give every match your absolute best to end up at the top, and then if you do, you do. If you don't, you don't, right? That's as simple as that. But here, because if you mess up at one event, you get an opportunity at the next one. I think that's kind of a cool chance for the teams to continue to have their hunger not tested, but continue to make sure that it's not going to dissipate very quickly because they have so many chances to continue to compete. But the flip side of that, like you're saying, if you win the game, aka win the major, and get MVP of the major, where else can you go from there? You know, like you've already hit the peak of Counter-Strike, and I think when you look at Skadoodle, who did the same, he retired not long after that major win, right? And Scar, if you watch his stream, he's a guy who loves playing games, but like he plays a game to complete it. That's when you watch him play these story mode games. That's what he's doing. He's playing to win. So for Counter-Strike, I guess he probably has the similar feeling that he beat the game. I wonder if Counter-Strike will ever see a period of time where that hunger will be able to continue year-round from multiple teams. Like, obviously, teams are hungry to win, but Liquid right now are the ones who, even though they're still winning, seem to be showing the most hunger. Like, they're boot camping for several weeks in advance for their stage of the major, where some teams, Mousesports, who we just saw lose 6 to G2 on their best map, they just picked Train. They just lost 16-6 to G2, old permaban for that team. They only had 6 days boot camp. Liquid aren't even here. They've already been boot camping for longer than what Mousesports are. So I question, in that kind of regard, why everybody is not looking at Liquid and just copying exactly what they're doing, at least in terms of amount of time spent.
It's something that, it reminds me, just this, like, talking about this idea of hunger and just how how difficult it is within the way the ecosystem of the game is. I know you've been quite vocal on your thoughts and feelings when it comes to the economy, and obviously this is something that lends to more consistency or less consistency in terms of your reward as a team that plays the best Counter-Strike, because you could argue inherently right now there's more chances for the worst team to always get back in, which is more punishing for the better team, which ultimately you want to strike a balance in terms of you don't want it to be super easy. You want that best team to really have to work for it, to throw a wrench into the system every so often, because that's just exciting as a viewer as well. But you can't go crazy with that, because then you can't follow things. You can't really recognize the true greatness of the individuals. So do you feel like Counter-Strike is too far in one of those directions?
As a purist, right? Like for me, obviously any little change I look at and I try and study what the outcomes possibly could be and how it's going to affect the game. That's kind of on the desk. A lot of people don't realize, but that's kind of what we do, right? We're here to theory craft what could happen and using the information we have available to us. And that happens with updates too. My biggest grievance, I think, here with the whole change of economy is that for me, if you had won, let's say the scoreline was 12-12, it was a very close game. If you won a 1v3 at 12-12 previously, you've almost secured your team the game, right? Like you've just probably tipped the economy in a lot of situations. You've just given your team that massive leap forward. Whereas now, that's gone. You still might win the 1v3 at 12-12 and then you get 13 rounds, but the other team can still buy. That feels like almost every round is a viable round. Now, if that's Valve's direction of going, we want to take those uncontrollable factors, which are still controllable by not losing rounds, but uncontrollable in the sense of how much they punish you out, and just go, well, we'll give you the best chances every so often to go in. If you could kill everybody with a CZ. We see that. We saw Facecrack run in topside on Nuke just before and get an ace with a Mac 10 versus a full gun round, right? So Valve wanted everything to be viable. They wanted to give as many opportunities to everybody as they could. And I think that with the nerfs that we've seen, they've definitely achieved that. I just feel we have traded a little bit of, oh my God, I can't believe he just did that. That gut feeling, what it's going to feel like to the team who lost that 1v3, what it's going to feel to the team who know that they've just won that 1v3 and they've just broken the economy of one of their biggest opponents on a stage match and they've just shattered their, like, that for me, that feeling is gone a little bit. When I'm watching now, I'm seeing like big clutches almost every game, It's not that it's not skilled players, it's very skilled, it's just they don't have the same ramifications.
Right, and it is interesting, I think. I think one of the beautiful things about Counter-Strike and games that you don't see it too often, honestly. It's a hard balance to strike between making the individual as important as the team, so that you can be a fan of a Simple. A Simple can take over the game, but at the same time, it's his team that can either help to set him up, or it can be the case that he is just that remarkable. And striking that balance in terms of a spectator sport, also for the players as well. I mean, that's something that Counter-Strike has always had that factor to it, and it's one of the reasons why the game is so deep, because also as a team and as an individual, you have so many decisions you can make. And so it is interesting to see the development, the evolution as well, because obviously Valve are going to be taking it in their direction, which, I mean, it doesn't seem like we have really any input, or the pro players, but they'll take it in that direction. And it is interesting to see exactly how the pros find that consistency, because it's their livelihood ultimately, which is also another issue.
It's pretty amusing when you think about how Counter-Strike got to this point, because it was an accident, right? Like, Counter-Strike was never intended to be like this. It was a mod of a game. It was different people adding in different points of, I guess, the history of iterations, new rule sets, like the overtime rule set. You saw at the moment, Alchemist, the guy who introduced 10k overtime, said that is something which he doesn't like, and he was the person who introduced it. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, Counter-Strike has been around now for a very long time. CSGO only has been around for 7 years. We've had different money systems, different iterations, and none of that has actually been in control of Valve's hands until recently. Back in the CGS days, the Source days, CGS came along. They were a TV company who decided they wanted to put Counter-Strike on TV with a bunch of other games. FIFA was in there, Forza was in there. What else did we have? DOA was also in there. So it was a bunch of different games, and you were kind of syndicated. But what they did was they made it full TV. They made it an MR9, so you had 10 rounds to win. The round times were shorter. You started with 16k, and it was very quick. So all gun rounds, right? But that's the thing, is that was a TO decision. You didn't have to play like that. Everyone else in the rest of the world still played MR15. Before, it used to be MR12. where we are right now is all with obviously community getting upset or players saying things or people asking for things and Valve doing it, but they clearly have their own mantra when it comes to this game. And a lot of the things that when I've spoken to them in the years over the past, I remember the eco thing blew my mind at the beginning. I was like, how many ecos do you want teams to win? And they were like, 4 or 5 out of 10 is not bad. Back in my day, if you won 1 out of 10 ecos, you were doing great. No one ever won ecos back in the day, especially in 1.6. Now, almost every single round of Counter-Strike is viable. And that's not a bad thing. It just doesn't tell the story in the way that I resonate with the most. And that's just preference-based, right? I still love the game. It's just this current version is not my favorite version. And as we continue to go forward, as we continue to grow, I'm sure the money system will change again, and it'll probably be another system, and maybe I'll love it. So that's the really, really cool thing about this is, even though we aren't in control, they're not ruining our game, right? They're not completely... we don't see bloody bazookas, and there's not tanks, and there's none of this nonsense. They're keeping it true to the core, but changing it so that hardcores like me get pissed off. So I guess they're doing a good job.
It is actually really interesting too, because I guess the true test of this balance is also if at some point, we might be a few years till we get there, but imagine if you have 8 teams that are as good as Liquid and Astralis playing in a tournament. Then we're going to really see, because if you get that situation, which, should be pretty inevitable when the game reaches some critical mass, we get all the support that we have. Now there's so much data out there that you're skipping like an entire decade of experience that we had to go through, when we were younger, and we had to just figure everything out. No one knew anything. And so you get to skip all that. You have all the support in the world. You've got the best gear. You have everything you could possibly need. We're going to get, that situation will happen. And if that happens and we get 8 teams where you just, no one can be consistent, then there's an issue.
Sure.
Then there really is an issue, I guess. And maybe Valve will respond to that potentially, because then this, the esports starts to get a bit more dry. And that's also an interesting factor too, because the esports industry is growing exponentially. It's changing all the time. There's new things coming in all the time. And Counter-Strike, sure, it's a legacy game, but I wonder if Valve at some point might step in to take a little bit more control to try to grow it a bit more. Because if you look at it compared to a lot of the other esports, it's still very much just, it's a free market. Anyone can jump in and run a tournament. And Valve are, as you said, very hands off. So is there a point in which they're like, okay, we have to grow this because we want to keep making money and we want to keep the game going? And if they do step in, what would you most want to see from them? Is a franchised system a good way for them to go? Or because obviously the international, that kind of circuit, that has a lot of issues.
Yeah.
That's not a great model, I think, for us to follow.
So this is something which I think about all the time, right? We discuss this on the HLTV Confirmed podcast a lot. We talk about the money system and the formats and this and that. And I like that Valve is hands off, right? They're not a helicopter parent. League of Legends, they're a helicopter parent.
Oh yeah.
They're there with you on your first date, making sure that you ain't playing grab ass, staying one Bible length apart, right? That's what League of Legends are doing. And you can't even, they're so monitored in those type of games that it takes the personality out of a lot of it, right? That's kind of what I feel. Now, do I think that, somebody having a dick gag as their only joke is funny? It can be. Do I think that it's necessary to be shoved down people's throat all the time? Wow, that wasn't even intentional. No, I don't. But that's kind of where the differences lie, at least in the personality being shown. But if we're just talking about what Valve coming in and stepping in could potentially do, I think what I would like to see them do is maybe separate... I don't know, it's a hard one. Because right now we kind of make up our own terminology for everything, right? Like a tier 1 team or a tier 2 team or a tier 3, but they're not really defined by anything. Maybe if Valve could come in and say, hey, look, DreamHack, you're already running these opens. They're already really good. They're 8 teams and they give new teams a chance, but we're going to limit you. You can only have teams who compete in this caliber, right? If Valve came in and could impose that or whatever, that would mean that the circuit would be a bit clearer. So maybe I have to play in the DreamHack Open circuit for the whole year, and if I come top 2, I get an opportunity to jump up to the next circuit with a bunch of other TOs or whatever it may be. But maybe it would give us a chance to see the best in the world go toe-to-toe more consistently, to see who is actually the best team. It would also mean that we don't have we lose a little bit of excitement of the open circuit, right? We don't have Dream Eaters coming in and winning against Vitality. That wouldn't happen. I guess that's the luxury that we have here. I don't know. I'm just trying to think. There's so many different ways that you could stimulate more growth. It just depends on what the long-term game plan of Valve is, and I think that they're more than happy just to be nurturing, but not overbearing. I don't know. It's a difficult one. What do you think?
Well, the thing is, as you say, like one of the I think the most beautiful things that they have done is they have created this situation whereby anyone can get involved. It is that free market approach, which is the best way to create innovation. That's just proven through and through, and we've seen so much innovation in our productions because like one thing that it's not just the innovation of grassroots esports companies who want to be production companies within esports and making esports content and the infrastructure that naturally creates, which is really important because that's going to stimulate more jobs. So that's going to overall grow the market, grow the scene. That's really important, as opposed to just outsourcing stuff because you have all the money in the world. But also, it's really forcing the fans of the game, which is us and everyone that works in these projects, in these grassroots organizations, to find ways to innovate and on how do you actually make the broadcast work, because no one knows how to do it. And
sure.
Obviously there are some limitations in terms of spending, and you know what, like an analyst desk, I know we're going to get into this in a moment, could be 1,000 times better if we had the resources to make it 1,000 times better, but we don't. So that's one of the things that's lagging behind. But I feel like there will be that tipping point eventually where we get to this point where Valve are like, all right, you guys have done a really, really good job establishing what it means as a core community to show Counter-Strike in the way that a fan wants to see Counter-Strike, and not the way that we want to see Counter-Strike, but how you guys want to see it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is really amazing about this. And so it's always easy to be in this position right now where we're like, why can't we have this? Or like it's so easy to just fix this or to do that. And I think we're getting there. I think in the next
Definitely.
2 to 3 years, I think we're getting to this really interesting point. I had this conversation. I was talking with this. I forget. Well, his name's Grizz. He's the guy that is who basically was the mastermind behind this latest documentary in. Oh my God, I'm actually blanking on it. In Dota. Oh my God, I'm completely blanking on the name of the documentary. It's the latest documentary in Dota. It's fantastic.
I wanted to say First Sight. It's not that.
It's not the True Sight thing. That's a Valve thing. But either way, it's like the spiritual successor to free-to-play. It's by Hollywood 705. They did the original content around like Fallen and the Brazilians for the Valve majors and so on. So they're like some Hollywood guys that came in to do content in esports. So they're fantastic. And he was saying how like it's very cyclical in the way that these different industries work. Film and television. New technology comes around. Everyone gets very excited. Everyone invests. Everyone goes crazy. Then there's kind of this burnout, and then like 70% of people who get in, initially interested get kind of cut out, and then big companies come along and buy everything. So in this instance, it might be the big television companies. It's like the people who own the IPs, like the developers. Yeah. They'll come in and they'll take the best of what was built over the hype, and all the money that was lost in, for example, let's say like looking at the Overwatch, all these things are learning experiences. And so, I agree. I think we're moving towards this tipping point where at some point, especially in the last couple of years, we've seen Turner Sports, we've seen NBC, we've seen ESPN, we've seen these massive media companies starting to get extremely interested. We're seeing all the numbers in television kind of dropping because we are the demographic, now, and we're watching on-demand gaming content, esports content. So we're headed there in, I think, a fairly short 2 to 3 year period. We're going to start to see really big changes in terms of the types of investment and professionalism. So I think the changes are coming. And to loop back to the question, I don't have a perfect answer. What I would like to see is I would like to see if I'm someone that watches let's say esports, I can go and watch the TI and be like, I can follow these storylines for this month, and now I feel like I'm part of everything.
Sure.
In Counter-Strike, if you're coming from outside, maybe you get a major for a couple weeks, but otherwise it's just all over the place in terms of storylines and teams. There's no consistency. So I think I would love to see narrative consistency, and also really like what you were talking about how you would segment things, how you could have a team like in League of Legends, for example, it really means something if you're a casual to have certain ranks.
Yeah.
Because it you can really see how that interfaces with where the professionals are, and to have those ranks, it's something that's very clearly defined. And I think that's something that's also really important, having a really clearly defined elite tier and what it means to be that tier. And because if it's, I mean, we, as you say, we made those terms up. We know what it means because we're in this. But other people, they don't really understand what tier 1 means. They don't know how hard that is.
Yeah.
So, man, I think we're in the most exciting esport, but it's extremely frustrating at the same time.
Yeah.
So.
I know there's a lot of times where you're just banging your head against the wall going, this seems like such a no-brainer, right? It feels like it would bring a lot. But the issue is always going to be the same thing, no matter what we're dealing with. There's always going to be money and time. Those are the two biggest problems that I think we have. And the biggest issue that is in Counter-Strike right now is the fact that, look at the calendar. When are any of us meant to stop and take stock? And I don't mean you or me or the players or even the viewer at home, anybody like that. I mean, even when are some of these TOs meant to stop and take stock, right? Because you finish an event, you're already working on the next one. There's almost every company that runs a Counter-Strike tournament runs other tournaments, right? Not just for Counter-Strike. They do like anything that comes across their doorstep. So these people are putting out a very wide net, and I don't know if that's necessarily a great thing for Counter-Strike, but certain organizations have teams that are put on just Counter-Strike, right? So that changes it up a little bit too. I think that not side content, but supplementary content could assist that narrative that you're talking about, right? Like in terms of people not being able to follow it, if there was an entertaining way to talk about Counter-Strike to appease a hardcore, but also the people who are on the fringe of wanting to be Counter-Strike fans and follow their favorite teams, you can offer them up a weekly or every 2 weeks an actual well-produced bit of content that they want to watch. Then we're talking, because now we're outside of having to sit there and watch 45 minutes of a Counter-Strike match. Day one, yesterday, now delays aside, that's not StarLadder's fault. We had this happen last time at the Cato Major. We had it happen in London as well. There was the build that comes out, right, that Valve give you on the first day. You can't test it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm no tech guy, but my understanding here is that when the game goes live, when they send those servers live, that's when all of your relays at home that you're watching go live as well. So the reason that they can't test the servers that Valve provide is because when they do that, that triggers the actual start, and you can't stop it and go back. So that's why, like, Valve are, oh my god.
Yikes.
Well, I guess the timestamp of this podcast is G2 versus Sports.
Just nailed 3 people in the face with an eagle. That's nice.
We'll know where we were. But I think that Valve need to have people on site for the entirety of the major. That's what they used to do. I don't think it's good enough for them to rock up for the last 4 days anymore. These first 2 weeks or the first week and a half is where all the games go down, man. Like, this is yesterday. We didn't finish work until 2 a.m., right? We started at 12. Delays aside, that's still a very long day, right? Regardless, even if we didn't have delays, we probably would have finished by 10, maybe, right? That's still a long day. How many people at home listening to this, people watching Counter-Strike, are going to watch every single game of CS? We're playing so much Counter-Strike over the next 2.5 weeks. It's almost impossible to watch it all, yet we do.
That's true. Yeah, it's very true. It's quite the mission at times. It's something as well whereby it's just kind of a conundrum how you would want to do the programming. Obviously, like in this perfect, I mean, I don't want to say it, but it kind of comes down to money in many respects. And the reason I don't want to say it is because that's just, again, like just not where we are. And I'm always thinking about like, what can we do right now? But it's so expensive to add a day, even a single day is so expensive. Just adding the day rate of all the talent, all the people working at production, all the freelancers, and the renting of the venue and all the rest of it. Just so, like, every time you switch the studio on, it's like so many thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So it is a money thing ultimately. And if you as you say, like, if you have these systems where you can have premium programming, where you can have these super solid narratives, where you can have this, I mean, we can talk about it in a moment, like a way to tell the storyline, like not quite match of the day style of having a bunch of guys in the studio kind of giving the kind of macro overview and being able to go through any analytical tools that they want, any replays they want, and really being able to spend time and love and nurture the way that the narratives go for the viewers. without the ability to do that, it is quite difficult when you have so many games to really catch people up, or to have a format that actually makes sense when it's so compressed.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I mean, like, one thing I wanted to ask you is, obviously, you went all in. You were homeless effectively for a year, just bouncing around hotels. You left Australia to be an analyst, and I know that being an analyst is quite stressful in terms of the fact that we do have these limitations on the desk, as we mentioned before. Like, for example, you don't quite have segments with like a telestrator, for example. How is that so few and far between? I mean, that's not even expensive. It's just like it's just one extra guy maybe to man it, and the equipment, which is not that bad.
Yeah, look, from my standpoint, being able to show a viewer something which because what you guys watch at home is not necessarily showing you the whole picture. An observer, no matter how good they are, no matter how good that team is who are controlling the cameras in game, will not be able to catch every single element of the game. And also, we want to show you the entertaining parts of Counter-Strike. You don't care while Kenny S is AWPing 5 people that Shox threw the flash that allowed Kenny S to kill those 5 people. You just cared that Kenny did some sick no-scopes and got a double kill. What I want to show you in the post-game is Kenny got this because Shox threw this sick flash, and look at what it did to their economy, right? This is the flow-on effects, the cause, and what that means for this situation, and why the detail of Kenny being able to do that meant so much more. And those things, that's what I want to be able to show the viewer, right? The viewer doesn't care about someone's ADR or how many kills they got, right? Like, maybe they do if they're really into like simple, right? Or they're into star players. They're easy metrics. That's how we can convey to you, this guy had a good game. But what we really want to convey to you is this is how much impact this guy had, and how. And it is difficult. And I've been working with different people and TOs, and different companies have different ways of going about it. Starlighter made it clear to me that they didn't want to do anything remotely analytical of that vein of a telestrator during the major, which is fine. It's their broadcast. If they don't think it brings value, I can understand that. Those clips, they very rarely end up on the front page of Reddit or anything like that, right? They don't bring value. People spend hours upon hours of doing YouTube clips and editing everything and doing that and giving you their insight on a situation, and it probably gets about 100 views on YouTube. But some dickhead, does something funny where he puts on a Australian accent and runs around a server calling everyone mate. It ends up front page of Reddit with 200,000 upvotes, and people are like, oh my god, this was so funny. So what are we living for here? If I try and appease the hardcore viewers, well, I'm dealing with a very small amount. If I try and appease the memes, just doing the memes, then I'm not giving the casual viewer, the new viewer, a real indication of what this story could be about. And it's a balancing act between pleasing everybody and making sure that you're still, able to give a good view of Counter-Strike. Because if you watch Liquid play all the time and then you have to go and watch Dream Eaters play, you can't hold Dream Eaters to the same bar that you hold Liquid to, but you still need to be able to critique them in a way that is not too harsh, which is fair considering their circumstances. All of these things, it's hard because everyone's view on what Counter-Strike is, or who the best is, or what this team is good or bad is different, because there's no it's not like weightlifting. If you go out there and you bench press the max and no one else can bench press as much as you, well, you're the best. In Counter-Strike, you might have had a bad matchup, you might have had a bad day, you might have a bloody broken mouse. All of these factors play into it, and it's harder to see who definitively is the best without that consistency. And as an analyst, we have to base our knowledge of a matchup off of what we know. Right? I get people tweeting at me like, "Oh, you didn't pick these guys. Why don't you believe in them?" Well, because statistically, they sucked. Statistically, they're not a good team. Or head to head, they shouldn't be winning this matchup. Or when I watched Simon Gaming play in the minors, they were actually atrocious. They were atrocious.
Yep.
If you go back and you watch the demos of them play, and you can sit there and you can say, hey, Chad, they weren't atrocious. You probably weren't watching the same games of Counter-Strike as what I was, right? So there's all these factors that go into it. The homeless thing, but that was kind of fun, right? Like, we travel a lot, but for me, that period of time, let's try and work this out. That was 2017. Okay, so 2016, I just retired in the middle of 2016. Later 2016, I was starting to do analyst work, and then 2017 is where I went, fuck it, let's just go. Like, I tried to make sure that my calendar was booked up for the entire year so that I didn't have to go home, which isn't great when you were dating somebody from Australia, and then obviously that ended. But I wanted to pursue this, and I wanted to do this as much as I possibly could. And it became quite prominent towards the end of 2017 that living out of a hotel room for 365 days a year is definitely no way to live. And that's kind of why I now live in Malta, and before I lived in Germany and did all those bits and pieces. But that's far removed from the analytical side of life. I thoroughly enjoy this, and that's why I want to do it as much as I possibly can.
I want to rewind a little bit actually, because I want to get into sort of more of your like direction in terms of this and the kind of where things are now and where you like what impact you have with that and where you want to be going. But you mentioned kind of how we do the broadcast a little bit there, and I was. Like that style that I wouldn't wouldn't go for like the whole telestrator segments and so on, and I've been thinking recently that one thing that we're really missing, obviously for a long time, for whatever reason, people don't really seem to understand, or at least it wasn't reflected in a lot of the ways that the hiring was done, or people were, the way that the focus was in the community, that observing is extremely important. Like it's the camera, it's like what everybody sees, and we know what bad observing looks like, and it saps. It's just like a charisma vacuum. It just takes away all of the value and all of the fun, everything. Yeah. And what I've been thinking about for quite some time, because you have everybody trying to do different systems. I want maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but obviously Sliggy has done a great job with his observing, and one of the reasons is because he's able to help tell the story. Yeah. Now, one of the issues that we've had at events is that there needs to be a connection between the observer and the commentators. And if there's a bit of dry, something, it's a dry round, not much is going on for you as a commentator, they help you out. And one thing that we don't get also that much is the communication from them, which is really good. For example, Eamon in this situation, maybe he sees something and he's going to do a replay of someone doing a setup with a flashbang. Hey, maybe nothing flashy happened in that round. Now he can tell the commentator that's not talking, hey, we're going to go to a replay, and it's of this setup, and this is why they're doing this setup. Boom. Now you got some like really juicy, substantial stuff in a round, which was otherwise kind of uninteresting, and that's pretty amazing. And that's just opening up the channel of communication between a team of observers and the commentators. Everyone speaking on the same language, which is very important. Yes. Because there's always a disconnect there, and that's a problem. And the other thing as well, so in Hollywood, when you have a film, who gets a lot of the credit? Who's not the actors? It's the director and the writers. Yeah. However, there is a person that is considered a god on set, this guy is called a DP, director of photography, and this guy gets to hire his own team, or his or her own team most of the time. They get to bring their own people, or they probably don't do the job because their job is so complex. They make everything look and feel in like good. That's their job. Yeah. If you don't have those people, it's like not having your camera guy. Yeah. In Counter-Strike, if you have a bad observer versus a good one, it's incredibly important and underrated. And I feel like we're lagging behind in this area. So that's my gripe as a commentator.
Yeah, I'm with you there though, because I think that when you look at what observing can be versus what it is across the board for most TOs, it's showing kills, right? I think that that's not a problem because a lot of stuff you can show in replay. So like if you miss something, you can always show it in replay, right? Even if you miss kills, you can show it in replay. But you guys want the action and you want it live. It's extremely important, I think, in the large arenas to be showing the kills, because that's how you get the best reaction out of everybody there, right? Like if you miss that because you're doing an overview of a bomb site as they're already running in, and you're letting the action unfold without trying to catch it, you're probably going, it's not as intense, right? It's not as intense because you're not in that first person perspective. But it's almost game dependent as well, isn't it? Because some games play really fast, some games play really slow. The things that I love that Sliggy and Co do though is Keita will catch the setup that's going on and he'll let Sliggy know because he's trying to cover the action, right? But Sliggy is so aware as an individual that he's still probably caught it himself and it's just been set up for him. And this is the thing. I think because Sliggy has been someone who's played high-level Counter-Strike before, he knows what to look for. Some of the observers are just people who click the button onto which player is about to get the next kill. They're different. They're two completely different avenues. And someone else from the UK who I think is a very good asset and could help a lot with the in your ear, hey, this is a very important thing to talk about, would be SEO. He's previously done some stats and stuff. He does all these big stat pages, and I've looked at some of the stuff he's written. Now, it's obviously my job to go through and do prep work and to look into teams and all this kind of stuff. But to be able to feed the casters, Chris J just got a kill with a USP there, guys. I'll just use this example. If that was the first USP kill that Chris J had in the entire tournament, wouldn't that be cool if like the stats guy got in the ear after this round, hey, that was the first USP kill that Chris J's had in this entire tournament. You've got a fun fact that's statistically based, which is like, okay, Chris J now finally finding impact with that weapon. It's obviously not a massive point. I'm using just a USP, but you kind of get what I'm saying. If he can bring you those, this is the first time that we've seen G2 Esports play Dust 2 since September 2018. Also not true, but just a point I'm saying, right? These are things that you're a caster, you come in, you don't know what the veto is going to be. Like, you might look into it, but you're not going to look into where every single player looks like I do. You're getting there ready to be able to project the game in the best way you possibly can. Our levels are different. I'm also meant to help educate you guys. So the continuity of the broadcast, I think, is hugely important, right? Like, is what you're saying. We do the desk segment. We feed information to everybody. That information, hopefully, sometimes is quite good. And then you guys can use that in the broadcast. And then the observer can feed you more information. Or let's say I spoke about the mid to B strat that G2 always love to run, where they throw the 2 mid to B smokes, they throw the one on the corner on the B side, and they walk out into it, and a flash goes off above that smoke as it's starting to fade. If I spoke about that on the analyst desk, and then they did it in the game and they won the round, then you guys are going to be talking about it. Everybody in the observer room is ready to, show that strat if they see it coming. And the viewer at home is now, holy shit, this is what they just spoke about. Like, how's this going to play out? Like, they're invested in this. I just said, well, they win this round 9 out of 10 times. And they do it and they win it again. It's like, oh my God, this is great. Like, we just learned something. That's another thing I think we struggle with, is giving the viewer information that they can take into a game and arming themselves to know what to look for. Because, yeah, sure, an ex-professional Counter-Strike player or a hardcore Counter-Strike player knows what they're watching, but my mum doesn't, and she knows that 5 people are trying to shoot 5 other people, but if I told her, hey mum, if they try and do this, it's because they think that player sucks, she'd be like, oh my God, this guy, he's the bad player, they're going to keep targeting him, that's so mean. My mum's invested for like a really weird reason, but she's still invested. So yeah, there's lots of room for improvement. I'm just curious how long it's going to take for us to get there, but things are going in a blistering pace, and it's definitely for the right, I think. I think we're making good adjustments across the board. I agree with you, though. Maybe we need to glorify our observers a little bit more so that we can make sure that we have the best people. But there is a team back there, right? Here they have 3 people observing each game. I don't want to give away any of StarLadder's secrets. I just know that there's 3 dudes sitting at PCs for each game. I don't know what their roles are. I'm assuming one of them does replay. I'm assuming one of them does the live, and one of them does delayed catching the highlights, right? That's probably what's going on. But the observing this event, you've obviously cast a lot more games than I have thus far, but the ones I casted, it was pretty easy. See, just quickly, look right now, right? Chris J has the only Molotov left, and on this retake, this is going to be important, right? They've started focusing now, but they should just stay on Chris J's Molotov, show it probably where it lands, and then what happens from there. Because his Molotov went off, it forced that car player out, Yeah. But it's all personal preference, I suppose.
Being an analyst right now, again, I sort of mentioned some of the frustrations which we've been talking about. Obviously we're very young, as you mentioned, and it's easy to get frustrated. But are you happy like where you are being an analyst, or is it getting increasingly frustrating? Maybe not being able to, or do you ever feel like you can't do your best job, and is that something that you struggle with, or have you made peace with it, and you see yourself in 10 years doing this if Counter-Strike keeps going the way it's going?
I don't know if I've made peace with it, in the sense of I'm always trying to, with whoever I work with, I'm trying to come up with a way that we can add to the broadcast, right? I've worked with TOs before where I've said, just set me up a PC that can run Counter-Strike. I will use a program to record the clips that I like. I'll grab the demo live out of the game, and I will send your production the clip, and we'll play the clip and I'll talk about it, right? That's not in my in terms of like what my job is. That's not really in terms of what I have hired to do, but that's what I want to do, because it means that I can show the viewer what I want to tell them. It's better than me just sitting there going, yeah, I fucking loved round 12. I can't believe they did that. And everyone's like, round 12? I didn't even tune into round 14, So I think to tell the true story of a tournament or the true story of a Counter-Strike match, you need a bunch of different assets. You need a round timeline, first of all. You need a flowchart of the economy, obviously all of the different kills, deaths, assists, etc. Even a breakdown of weapon usage would be a cool thing to have if you can find a place for it. But every game of Counter-Strike is a different story, right? Every game of Counter-Strike has to be told differently. The post-game and the pre-game are two very important things. You can have a matchup with two teams that have never met each other, so we're going into the dark. You can have a matchup with two teams who have rich history of being rivals. We have a whole different game on our hands. We're talking about them in completely different lights because we know there's history. When we do the post-game segment, what we want to do for you is one of two things. We want to either break down the biggest turning points of that game, or let's say I went out there and I said that Mouse Sports were going to win Dust 2 because the double AWP setup of Voxic and Chris J was going to be so impactful. But then we go back, and in the post-game segment, we bring up the stat lines of AWPers. We have Kenny, and let's go with Lucky, because I think he does the secondary AWPing duties on Dust 2 CT side. And then you show that against Chris J's and Voxic's AWP stats. Well, if G2 win, and Chris J and Voxic have hardly any AWP kills, but Lucky and Kenny have shitloads, I've just very easily shown you why my point of Woxic and Lucky need to show up didn't work. And that's why I thought Mouse Sports were going to win and they didn't win. Well, okay, it's quite clear there, right? There's all these bits and pieces. But for me, down the track, I think I want to try and do a little bit more ancillary content. Like the Monday before a tournament starts, we should really do a show where we come in and we say, hey, this is where the rules have changed from last time round. This is all the teams to look out for. These are the new names that you maybe never heard about. Get Right's got an injury. The coach is playing. Get all of that out of the way on a show where it's just dedicated to talking about those things. Have a couple of players come in, do some interviews, talk to them about the tournament that they're about to play in. Do all of these things so that the viewer who knows that they're about to watch Counter-Strike from Tuesday to Sunday, they are already set. They already have all the information they need. They tune in to watch us break down a game of Counter-Strike. They don't tune in to watch me tell a story. Right now, I have to tell a story. I have to tell you who these 5 players are. I have to tell you their entire history within Counter-Strike. I have to tell you what this current iteration means. And that's not what Kenny looks like, by the way. But we have to do all this. Then we have to tell you about their play style. Then we have to tell you about what map they're playing. Then we have to tell you about on that map where they play, what strategies they might run, what style they like to go with, how many times they've played it. We have to tell you all this information about every single team. Well, we want to, if we can reduce some of that, right? If we can reduce some of that by putting the load elsewhere or by already having produced content that we could play when we know that matches are coming up, we would find ourselves in such a better position. But it's impossible when you have to do a day like yesterday. All 16 teams played 2 best of ones. There would be no prep time for me to go from the first set of best of ones and make content for the second set because the matchups, they're not random, but they're drawn after the results have come in, and we don't know what the results are until they're finished. So assets of sideshows like that, DreamHack recently did something on caffeine. So after the broadcast ended, they did the caffeine show. I think it was on the Sunday. I think maybe they did it twice. It was after the group stage and then after the grand final. I think those ideas are good. I think that they maybe, in my opinion, were a little bit fluffy for what I would like to watch. I would like to be a little bit more to the point. Obviously, I still want it to be entertaining, but I just think that it's a little bit too fluffy what they did, and maybe not a long enough time period. I think if you're going to do a summary for an entire tournament and you're going to have a bunch of players and personalities on there, I would like to see something go for with all the assets and all the content you could sandwich in there, an hour to an hour and a half. And people might sit there and go, "That's so much time." Maybe, but you watch what we can actually tell you in that time, and then you tell me if you think it's too much time, right? Because if you're a Counter-Strike fan, you're going to sit there and you're going to enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean that's so true, and I think it's really interesting because what we were talking about with casting just before, and you're talking about like throwing the stats in there, that adds a lot of meat, a lot of substance, because what we often have to do is we have to kind of, as commentators, we have to kind of work with, okay, well, there's not really anything that's that relevant, or maybe I kind of covered this already, but I have nothing else to really say, so now I either have to inject some inane humor, or I need to just kind of
go
maybe
podcast
I don't have any
mode.
humor, so we'll just like talk about what's happening, but it's kind of dull, and so it feels like there's a lot of filler, a lot of fluff, as opposed to just, because every time you speak, you really do want there to just be substance,
Yep.
which which is good because also it means that there's less reason to just constantly be yapping, and you can leave the game to breathe a little bit more in the commentary, which I think is really awesome, because then it means that when you do speak, someone wants to listen because either it's something exciting is happening, you're building a moment, you're telling a story, or it's because you're really informing the viewers of more expectation. And it sounds exactly the same as to your story there with the desk, and this is something I've been wanting to see for years too, exactly what you've described, like less of this kind of this huge fluff where we always start out really wide on every single desk and then kind of close in terms of focus, and to have let's say we do have this tipping point happen. We have all the money. We have days where there's 4 hours of match programming for 4 days, and these are all like headline matches. You know the match is coming up in advance. You get called in a week before. And so that G2 comes up against Mouse Sports, and you do a day where half of your day is spent doing prep content for that, so that when you go into the analyst desk, you're like, okay, so the double AWPs of Wox and Chris J are really important now, and then you've already got a few demos in which you can look at the way that they rotate the AWPs, so you can highlight weaknesses, strengths, timings, like different, as you can really go deep. And if you're a viewer, you're a Counter-Strike fan, oh my god, that is money. That is so sick. The analyst desks would get so much more love, and they would really truly be analyst desks, because they'll be offering a type of analysis and content and breakdown that you would not see anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it would only serve to really be just substance. So again, like that's another thing that is absolutely possible with the money.
Let me throw you an example at you, right? So like during the Katowice major, I was doing those clips, and there was a game where, I went, obviously each matchup we only know like the night before, right? Because all the games finish, then the matchups get drawn, then we sleep, then we wake up, then we try and do prep, and then we do our job. I coming into these Rush, the observer for ESL, I either send him an email and say, hey Rush, can you make these clips and we can use it as B-roll, or I can run them as telestrator segments or whatever, or I make them myself. And when we do that, I have to theory craft what I think the veto is going to be, right? I have to go there and I theory craft, and then certain teams, there's like almost no way to know because they have the same map pool, so I don't know what they're going to pick. I don't know like who's going to do. So I'm trying to prep for any given team 3 to 5 maps worth of content that is actually useful, right? Like that I can go, hey, here's a strategy that they've run. I've seen them run it 4 times. It's had success 3 out of 4 times, and this is how they do it. This is something that Mousesport should have noted, and if they lose to... Oh my god.
Sorry, this is round 14 of Mouse Sports G2 on Dust 2, and there's some really weird stuff happening. Sorry. All right.
Why didn't he react quicker? They might. What? Okay, cool. I guess.
My goodness. All right, sorry. Sorry for the interruption. That was very startling. I was startled.
That was a what the fuck moment, that's for sure. Where was I going with that? No, but I was prepping like 5 maps worth of content for 2 different. So technically 10 maps worth of content, but trying to find 1 or 2 nuggets, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the morning off, right? Because I've already watched the demos, I already understand, but you want to look for things that are head-to-head, because head-to-head is even better than just generic. You need that head-to-head. So, I don't know. I think that amount of matches, amount of possible games, all of those things are currently meaning that we can't lean in that direction, because we just physically don't have enough hours in the day. This is something, I don't know how you feel about this, right? We get paid good money. Like that's just the way we get paid good money. But also yesterday I got paid good money, but they also took 24 hours from me. Okay, you take the 8 hours of sleep every person, would want to get every day. Okay, that's fine. But they still took the rest, the entire rest of my day was just here watching Counter-Strike. And that's a fantastic thing to be able to do, and not anything that I'm complaining about. But what I'm saying is I can't do anything else for 17 days. I am here for 17 days to watch Counter-Strike, and I do that almost 365 days a year, right? We don't come in here and play 1 match a day for 17 days. We come in here and fit as many games of Counter-Strike as we can humanly show you without everybody in production backstage falling asleep or dying of exhaustion, right? We are putting too much out there, I think. I think we're putting too much out there.
Yep, agreed.
And we're not able to control any of what we're trying to tell the story of, because there's so many different facets. I'm referencing ECS, Pro League Finals, IEM Katowice, the major last year. I'm talking about a fucking GG Bet LAN. I'm talking about some Unicorn Cup. These are all things that we need to know about all the time, right? And there's just so much to keep your finger on at the moment. And I think when you look at what you were saying, almost in a, I guess we weren't saying, it wasn't like soft exclusivity, but it was kind of telling teams where you play, right? If I knew that I only had to worry about the tier 2 teams, right, my scope of teams has now gone from the potential, Vitality is an example, a team who just like appeared to top tier Counter-Strike after grinding, right? They weren't always on the top tier level, but they grinded and now they're here. But if I knew that I would only have to research them next year because they were coming into the circuit then, that means I only have to worry about my 10 teams or whatever. The level of content, we could start doing stuff that you see when you watch the LCS or whatever it's called these days, and they're actually able to break everything down. They get an opportunity to go into an office, like they have a lot of prep time, right? But they have an opportunity to go into an office and prep what they want to talk about for like several days before they do it. Right, we go out there, I get to prep it, sure. The major, I get to prep the first round matchups. I get to look into the historical stuff of this is the 15th major, all of that nonsense. But I hardly get any time to look at what is the head-to-head of G2 Mousesports with these two rosters, knowing that Mousesports have recently this year changed man A, B, C, and D, different coach, different this, different that. It's so much that we can't go as deep as what we want to go at the moment. That's where I think the problem is.
And the thing is, obviously, like the way that we're framing this is that, we're kind of frustrated in all the ways. Like these are all like great ideas and the kind of suggestions that you've been talking about and some of the things I've been talking about. And because they're great ideas, we don't have them now, but I'm pretty confident that because they are great ideas, we will see them at some point eventually in the future.
Yeah.
So that's that is the silver lining there, which is a pretty damn good one. But speaking like from another facet, something that I found interesting is that it does also seem, I think, again, like I don't want to really throw around any blame. I think it just is the situation. But it does feel like, because our job is so focused on I am a commentator, like what is directly impacting me from doing my job. So I'm super critical of anything like that. And for you, similarly with being an analyst, but as opposed to having to think about all the budget and the financial aspects and the sponsor obligations and running a production team and all the technical chat, like all the rest of it. Like if I feel like we don't get necessarily as much attention on the broadcast as maybe we should in certain areas. Like for example, sometimes I notice that a desk is put together and I'm thinking, I feel like if people thought about the chemistry, and that's a real thing, that we would have a much better desk situation here. And that's a really interesting one because, bringing up, let's say, have you watched QI with Stephen Fry? It's like a comedy panel show.
Yes.
So the two consistent parts of that panel, Stephen Fry obviously left, but when Stephen Fry was doing it, the consistent parts of the panel is Stephen Fry is the host, and he always has to his right a guy called Alan Davies. He's actually a very, very smart guy, but he plays the Joker. He plays the fool there. He's very smart, and you see it from time to time in a cheeky way, but he plays the fool. He plays a role. And those roles are really important on a desk because it's not just like it's a bunch of lads and it doesn't matter who it is. Yeah. It's like we tell a narrative, a storyline. We also, I think, the way that we deliver those storylines has to also be kind of engaging. And to do so, you do have to combine the right people because you can have 10 amazing people, but if they're mismatched, that's like a Counter-Strike team. It can be an all-star team, but it's just not going to win tournaments. Yeah. And you want the desk that wins. Well, there's winning. So is that something that you think about?
Oh, it's not something that I go into every day considering. I know that there's obviously, you have like good segments and you have bad segments, and there's like good flow. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's different TOs as well have different run of shows, right? So the whole thing is going to have a different flow. They have different sponsor requirements. All of those things factor in as well. It is definitely important who you have on the desk and how they gel well together. I try to be as much of a chameleon as humanly possible, right? Because I've probably now, out of all the guys, been doing this the longest, other than, say, like Duncan. I've probably been doing this the longest in terms of just pure analyst desks, right? And when I have somebody on who's new and maybe they're very stats-based, I stay away from the stats stuff. There's no point having two of us doing stats, right? If I'm on the desk with someone who's inherently nice and they're never going to, call a player out for making a mistake. Now, I'm never going to go out there and say, man, look how fucking dog shit these guys are. That's not my style of my job. But if somebody missed a shot or missed a smoke or they mistimed a flash or they knifed a teammate, I'm going to say that was a mistake because it was a mistake. And I'm not saying it to critique them as individuals. I'm saying it to critique what they did in the context of that one game, right? There are certain analysts that, don't want to be mean, and that's fine. It just, for me, I think, I don't consciously think anymore. Maybe at one period I did, but I don't consciously think of how I'm going to present myself when I go out there. I try to be as true to me as I can be every single segment, because the fact of the matter is that I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've had a lot of time on my hands to do some thinking over that player break, but this is literally my life, right? Like, I have given up everything that I had at home to pursue the idea of being a full-time Counter-Strike person, right? This is my life. And when I go out there and I'm frustrated at like maybe the way a team played a game, I'm genuinely frustrated, right? Like I'm not just putting that on. Like or if I'm like, I don't have a favorite team. I don't have any allegiances in that way. I obviously have players that I talk to, I get along with more than others. That's like every single walk of life. But for me, with this at this point, it's I want to be able to show everybody else in the world why this is the best video game ever made, and I love this thing, and this is my obsession, and my thing is wanting to show them why. I want to show them the intricacies of why that little detail got me so excited, and I made a noise, or I yelled, or why that play was so influential in the context of that game. Those are the things which excite me, and if I can share that with people and they can see it and they can even take just a little bit of that, that's what I'm excited to do, because this game has given me the life I get to lead now. And I feel pretty lucky to do that. Got pretty deep there for a second, Dan. Sorry, we didn't talk. We didn't get too emo. We can go down the emo road. That one's always fun.
No, I'm just curious. What was it about Counter-Strike that first drew your attention? Then, given that it's been so transformative, or such it's the centerpiece of your life.
I don't know if I always played video games, but I just played on console, and I never. I had a Super Nintendo, I had a Sega Mega Drive, and I had an N64. So I wasn't like a hardcore gamer, right? Like my parents didn't buy me a PlayStation because that had like the bad games on it. And then when an Xbox came out, I was already moving towards playing PC games. Counter-Strike was the first time I ever touched Counter-Strike was at a LAN center with probably 40 people, and I went with a bunch of friends from school, and I just loved the vibe of it. Like, it didn't matter who you were, like, sitting in the chair, it just mattered who you were in the server. And after that time, that was kind of just me dabbling my like toes into Counter-Strike. It wasn't anything serious. I got serious about Counter-Strike a year or two later, and that's kind of when I had a falling out with a group of friends. I didn't have any friends in high school. I used to sit alone at lunchtime and stuff. And that same thing that I remembered of, there's 40 guys and they're all playing Counter-Strike. We used to just go and play Aztec on LAN, and you just run around and just yell at each other and stuff. It wasn't scrims. It wasn't anything like that. It was just playing Counter-Strike, and there was always a couple of guys who were awesome, and most of us sucked, and they would just wreck us. And I was like, I want to be the best, right? And then when I started playing again, and I didn't have any friends, the way that I could make friends in the new LAN center that I'd go to was by being good at Counter-Strike. So what did I do? I just played Counter-Strike. And my parents wouldn't buy me a PC, and I understand that, and I nagged, and I nagged, and I nagged, and I nagged, and I nagged. And then eventually, when like local LANs became a consistent feature of my life, where I was going to play and compete, and then they were like, okay, well, I guess we'll buy you a computer now, because you're not just always going there and spending 8 hours a day. You're actually doing something that is relatively I guess engaging. That's kind of when the bug really kicked in. As soon as I had the PC, that's the probably the end. I think. Yep. I think. My parents and I used to argue consistently about obviously getting off the internet. Same problems everybody born in 1989 probably had with their parents, but they were always just wanting the best for me, right? This is, I think, something that gets misconstrued. Is in the interviews in the past, like I've been like, yeah, my dad and I, we didn't get along about it. Well, of course we didn't, because he had no idea that I was going to get to do this, right? If he had known this was the case, he would have been supporting me throughout all of this. All he knew was this was something which was obsessing a lot of my time. And that's a bit of a sinkhole as a parent, right? You obviously want what's best for your kid. So, I don't know, Counter-Strike made me feel like the best version of me, and that's probably why. Like, I'm not a confident guy. Like, I'm anxious when I go into a barbershop. I'm like, holy shit, like, I'm going to go to a barbershop in Berlin. Like, what do I ask the guy? Like, does he speak English? I'm a 30-year-old man who lived in Germany before, and I still have that thought before walking into a barbershop where I book the appointment.
No, I feel you, man.
Yeah.
I feel you. Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think similarly for me, I wasn't in the best position in my life, but sort of the achievements that I gained. I mean, like, a very competitive person, and the achievements that I gained, it was the one like in Quake, like getting onto like signing a contract at like 16 or 17 or whenever I did, and all of that. Like, that was like, because I was also kind of an outcast and an outlier, and I moved around a lot, and so I had that achievement, and that was massive for my self-esteem, because I was like, you know what, no one knows this except me right now, because no one in my entire school plays video games. It is the early 2000s. However, I know that I'm one of the best in the world at this game, and I worked my arse off for that, and that was like an incredible feeling that kind of like saved me in many respects. So I totally get it. You talked about like it helps you to be the best version of yourself. Like, what's the next evolution of that for you? Like, what kind of goals do you have in terms of your development, or like perhaps your weak points, or where you want to take yourself?
I think discipline is probably one of my biggest weaknesses, right? From a mental perspective, like telling myself to get up and go and do something. When I'm working in this job, like I was saying yesterday, they basically took 24 hours from me. I tried over the player break to be more active. I tried to exercise more. I'm lucky I get to live in Malta, where the weather is beautiful and there's no excuse for not going swimming in the ocean, right? Sorry, the sea. I'm having to change my terminology because we're bloody.
Yeah.
We're not landlocked, but it feels like we are a little bit when I look at that map. Anyway, the point here is that I want to be able to tell myself, you will go to the gym now and do it. Not sit in bed and do nothing and sit on my phone and, fucking go on Reddit and HLTV.org and just flick through and scroll. Those things right there are personal development things that have probably nothing to do with Counter-Strike, but will change the way that I present myself and do my job subconsciously. I already feel significantly happier in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, right? Like just going out of my way to do things for me, I feel a lot better. And I think that's something that I didn't take time for, because people follow me on Twitter and they see me get like super frustrated at people on the internet and abusing, like, you're a fucking idiot, and like trying to like reason with people who maybe are just trolling me, or people who maybe are actually stupid and they don't understand that standpoint, right? And I'm just having a legitimate argument like you would have. Those things right there that I do, that's because that's how stupidly obsessed I am with this whole thing, is that like I will literally get pissed off at some guy saying something that is so outlandish about this, because that's all I care about. And what I need to do is I need to be able to take a little bit of that care and put that back on myself. That's probably the thing that I need to work on the most, I think, and probably talking to my mum.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It can be difficult, like when you disconnect. Have you ever considered, as far as like the discipline thing goes, like sometimes I look at it and I think that it gets discipline and willpower and stuff. It can be like a little bit overrated in terms of it gets a bit too much of the attention and focus, when in reality I think it's more about making things, like, it's about the approach, the setup, and making things easy for yourself and finding it and being, kind of realistic. It's kind of like when if you look at, let's say, like diet or something like that, and someone does some like super restrictive diet that's extremely difficult to follow, and it's like, you just have to be disciplined and do this thing that's extremely difficult, takes an enormous amount of your time and money and focus, and like actually consumes huge amounts of your time just to follow it in the bare minimum ways. That's not a reliable thing to do. That does that, like, if you have to kind of set yourself up with the wins, and that's the difficulty is in finding the approach, but the difficulty shouldn't be in executing. I think that's sometimes the way that I look at it, because sometimes like it's just like you're banging your head against the wall, and you kind of get this cycle of failure, which doesn't ever really help. And I find that it's really important to always think about like finding the wins, and that's kind of how I look at it. I'm obviously no perfect human by any means, but in terms of looking at stuff like where I really struggle with something, I always try to make that reference point. I'm really struggling with this. Do I just have a really dumb approach to this? Okay. But that's just been me. As far as your personal life is concerned, you have made this move to Malta, and it's kind of like it seems like a bit of a lads thing. Everyone's in the house. Does the house have a name?
It's the Lanshan.
The Lanshan.
And yeah, just mansion, but with an L.
Nice.
But yeah, so look, this whole Malta move came about middle of last year, I would say, is when we really started talking about it, and that's because moving to Germany, I say something. This sounds stupid, and I think that it would probably be quite difficult for me to explain what I mean, but we'll say it anyway. I don't think that I ever stop and consider choices. Right? Like I don't sit there and like do a pros and con list. I kind of feel like I live my life like water. And what I mean by that is the path of least resistance. So if something looks like it is not the easier option, like, because that's a cop-out kind of response, but if something is the best option, looks like the best option, like just straight away off paper, and it will also alleviate problems, then we're going to take that option, right? So when I was living in Germany, a part of the reason I moved was, first of all, it's going to make my life a lot easier in terms of traveling for work, and a couple of other parts, obviously, socially speaking, I knew a lot of people from ESL who are based out of Cologne, so it made sense moving to Germany from having a networking perspective there as well. So there was all these different reasons, but I didn't look into, before I left, how much tax I would have to pay. I didn't look into, how archaic they are in certain facets of how they run their country. Now, Malta, not necessarily has anywhere near as good infrastructure as a place like Germany. Germany is much better in terms of transport and all of those things. But the Maltese tax is quite low. I have the ability to sit outside next to a swimming pool for the majority of the year, enjoy the sun. Whereas, like, that's another big thing. I came from being a plumber where I was outside in the sun every single day of my life. I'd go home and then I'd play Counter-Strike. And then as soon as I went full-time gamer, my lifestyle changed so much. This is one of my actual biggest regrets in my entire life, is that how this whole... It's only a regret because I can look back on it now and say this is what I would have done differently. I don't regret it at the time. But is the way that my professional Counter-Strike career went when we became Renegades. Because, dude, I went from being like relatively active, relatively fit, outdoorsy, I had have a good friend network, I had a girlfriend, I had the family, I had everything. Like, I had a very well-balanced life. I had my job, I had my hobby that I loved, it was a competitive outlet, and I had everything else in the right place. I went and I traded all that in for the goal of becoming one of the best Counter-Strike teams in the world. Now, didn't happen, but I spent the majority of my life either on an airplane or stuck in a hotel room in Las Vegas, where they kept moving us around to shitter and shitter places, where... I cooked when I was in Malta for like 5 or 6 days. That's the first time that I've cooked consistently, or probably cooked at all, in over a year.
Wow.
Like these little things. And it's like, they're things because if there's certain things in life that if I don't have to do them, I can pay someone else, I will. Like, to clean my home. Do I want to spend a couple of hours cleaning my home? No. Can I pay someone to do it? Yes. Okay, well, let's do that. But otherwise, it's just one of these situations where I don't even know where where we started with the whole point of this thing. Oh, the move to Malta. Hold on, let me move my phone. We're getting a bit of interference here. All right, there we go. Moving to Malta, yeah. So basically, me, Henry, and Machine are there at the moment. I don't know if Machine's going to stay, but he's there temporarily. And we've set up our little villa there in Malta, and we've got a little LAN dungeon with a big projector and PCs and all that stuff going on. We've got a living space, we've got the kitchen, we've got all that, and I didn't, like I said, I didn't have a lot of friends in high school. I'd never really had like a friend group. So it's good that I can find people who are like-minded that I genuinely get along with in this world, that can make my life easier, because the people that I am working with every day with Counter-Strike are actually my family. Like, this is my Counter-Strike family. These are the people who I see. My parents, it will take me a minimum of 18 hours on an airplane to see them. And that's like just flying time. I'm not even talking about like being at the airport. So for most people that doesn't seem, that they hear that, they are, okay, it's a flight, you can afford a flight. But I think at the same time, it's like, if I'm at my darkest or my loneliest, to find somebody in life to confide in, it would take me that long. I don't know how many other people can probably say that they find themselves in that position. Obviously, people get disconnected from their family members and stuff, and that happens naturally. But I've stupidly done this by choice, and I didn't really look at that as an issue in my life until I was like, man, I'm really sad. Why am I? I got a job that I love. I get to do what everybody else dreams of. I get paid very well. I travel the world. I see all these amazing things. why am I sad? And I think this is another thing I've been tackling recently, and it's because I haven't prioritized enough time to give me positive feedback. Everything I do is give, and obviously you get attention, social media, this, that, and the other. But 95% of the time, that's negative. So, yeah, a lot of things to decompile there, Dan. I don't know where you wanna.
No, I mean it's like the loneliness thing. I think is a really interesting topic because honestly, like it's something that everyone suffers from it from time to time. Of course, like it's we're human beings. It's like a fundamental quality that we get, like introvert or extrovert. Like if you're just a normal human person, then you're gonna experience that, and it sucks. And I think the lifestyle of traveling, it like inherently you get more disconnected. If you're already like somewhat disconnected, you get more disconnected. And for people who are used to being connected, they experience disconnection, and that's really difficult. Like for me, I didn't have that many people already, and all the relationships that I did have like were just atrophying because I was I was just never there. And so that feeling when like you really miss like some of your closest friends, and they just like you're in town but they just didn't invite you to that thing, and they're like, oh, they send you a message like, I wish you were here, and you're like sitting in your bedroom playing a computer game, and they just didn't think to invite you because you're like
never
the last
there.
5 times they invited you weren't there. That feeling is really rough, and that, it's definitely a very real thing. I think that it was I think for all of us doing this and anyone doing anything similar, we've all experienced like similar feelings and in our own ways, but it's all like some degree of loneliness and disconnection, and there's like a weirdness to a hotel room especially when you're bouncing around from hotel room to hotel rooms, when you're in a hotel room by yourself and you're looking around and there's nothing really to remind you of your home. I mean the only thing that's really yours is the suitcases and the things you've packed, which really are only a sign that you're not at home. And so there's like this general inability to truly relax and truly kind of be okay in that way and have any kind of comforts and stuff like that. So that after a while, I mean, like you were doing that for like a solid year, as you say, like you literally weren't going back. So that's a real thing that's difficult to deal with, and I think everyone struggled with it.
Yeah, I think I lived exclusively in hotels from the end of 2016 until February of 2018. I went back for Christmas for 2 weeks in the end of 2017, and then one of my friends from Cologne, she was leaving Cologne, and she offered me her apartment. So that was like when I snapped it, I said yeah, of course, like that was perfect. But that like whole that what I saw you do today when you took a photo of your bag and you put it in the group, the extra, you probably don't even like pay for it. You maybe even negotiate with the TO to get it paid for, which is fantastic. But even just having like an extra, like that's not your main suitcase.
No, I brought a separate.
You bring a separate.
But
that's a great idea.
I haven't done that in a while, but this time I was like, this is the thing that makes actually so much sense. I'm doing it. Yeah.
That I looked at that, and obviously the things in there are things that you enjoy doing, right? But I thought about it, and I thought like, if I just packed like a handful of things that would make the time that I have while I'm here, right? Like a little bit, not easier, but it's like a creature comfort, right? Then that's cool. Like that's gonna keep me grounded from all this. With lots of clutches here, mouse spots are coming back. Yeah, but I think that for me, like I'm trying to discover what those things are, and I think this is what maybe parents discover when their kids leave. That's kind of what my dad's doing at the moment, because my sister and I have been out of the home now for a very long time, but work's always been the thing that he can do. And at the moment in Australia, especially in Perth, with the building industry, it's not easy to get a lot of work. And my dad's the type of guy who used to, he would work 10 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and now he's being not forced, but now he's being left with, maybe he can work 2 days a week. And I know that he's bored. Like I know,
right.
And I never feel bored. I can't say I remember the last time I've ever felt boredom in my life. I just am really content with sitting and doing nothing, which makes no sense, right? Like it makes no sense that I would ever be happy with sitting and doing nothing, but that is the case in certain scenarios. I sit and I just will do nothing for hours, like literally just lay in bed on my phone. Or, maybe there was days there in Malta where I would just sit by the pool for like 3 or 4 hours. I guess you could say I was doing something. I was sitting in the sun, getting some much needed vitamin D. But to me, I'm not doing anything productive. And my brain needs to learn that is important time.
Do you feel guilty when you were doing that?
No, because that was the first break I had since the last major. Like proper breaks. So I was like, I need this. Let's recharge the batteries and let's go do it again. But I've come back with an approach of let's try and make sure the batteries never get emptied, so that you never have to feel that way, right? And that's the biggest thing on the agenda right now. It's just finding those things to do. So I started reading a lot, which is not something I did as a kid. I hated reading. I hated school. I didn't have a good time. The teachers at public schools in Australia were not necessarily the best educators. Obviously, you want to learn, and that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to play Counter-Strike. But I didn't read a lot in school, right? Because I didn't pay a lot of attention in class. In economics, which was the first period of a couple of my days, I would literally sleep because I'd set up the night before playing Counter-Strike till 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. And then now it's like reading. I've just started picking up books and trying to get through them and saying, okay, well, this is a good little time sink. If I read this book for an hour, I enjoy what I'm reading. It gets my creativity going, and it's something which is a distraction from maybe the things which are bringing me down. And I can do that, and then that's great. Before bed last night, I recently broke up with my girlfriend, and for me, like the whole thing like that, we don't need to get into that, but basically just sitting there and thinking about the details of that, you need to distract yourself from that. And that's not something that I am equipped to do just yet. Like, I'm still learning what I can throw in there. That's why the gym, I think, is good. It exhausts you. So even if you are mentally really, really still going, your body will be tired enough where you'll fall asleep. Like, there's all these things that I need to start bringing into my daily repertoire, which will make such a big difference. It's just things that I've never taken the time to really care about. And now that I'm getting older, like, it's you genuinely start to feel like shit the older you get. Like, you wake up and your body's sore. And you didn't even, like, what do you mean? I didn't even do anything. Like, I wake up and I slept funny and my neck's sore for a whole day. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
It is actually really funny because I do feel like we get this sensitivity as we get older, this extra awareness, almost like it's like you know how you have like a taste palette,
yeah,
and how you can like develop that taste palette. I feel like we get that way for like our feelings and our emotions and the physical state that we're in and so on, and you start to realize that you have needs,
yeah,
and it's really weird because obviously I don't know what it is, but I do feel like there was this switch that was pressed in my brain where I'm like, I am sad. Fuck.
Yeah, it's strange, right? Where did that come from?
Yeah, and then you have to like figure out. It's like, oh shit, I have this need now to not be sad. So how the fuck do I fix that? And then you start to think, hang on, what were all the other times I was sad? Because this happened. Like, I remember like experiencing depressions. Like, some of my worst depressions were like 10 years ago, and back then I didn't even understand how my behavior changed, what was different. I know that is one of the problems with depression, is like it's kind of difficult to like realize you're in it, but at the same time, like, now I feel like if I'm a little bit sad, I'm like, okay, fuck, I need to address this. This is something that is an issue and a problem, and I've like got tools now. I've got tools to like fix that shit. And so I feel like because we're like the same age pretty much, like I'm 31, you're 30, like you get to this age and you start to like become more of a master of yourself as you develop that sensitivity. I don't know why it seems somewhat consistent. I know a lot of people that it starts to click towards the end of their 20s, but yeah, it's a pretty big deal. And I'm glad you're like taking steps to do stuff for yourself, because really it's the only way, and otherwise it's just self-destruction. That's the only alternative.
I wish that we, like, our parents give us advice as we're growing up, right? And I wish that, like, the good advice, I'm not saying take all their advice, but your parents, there's for all the kids listening out there, they just want the best for you, right? And the advice that they give you is stuff that they did in their life that they fucked up with, right? Them being like, we need you to study, is because they fucked up and they didn't study properly, right? And they regret what they did. They're obviously projecting some of their insecurities, or maybe they did really good in school and they want what they have for you, right? But there's all those things that are getting pushed in your direction, and certain things like, we'll just use the breakup situation as one, right? You break up with someone and then the advice is, plenty of fish in the sea. That's the very callous. That's the last thing. Like, that's the feeling you have, like, once it's all done and you're over the emotional side of it, right? But if you could just, like, operate like that, if someone told you, okay, so, yeah, I know you're going to feel like shit right now, but, like, I've lived through this and realistically it's like this. And, like, you could just digest that and you, like, look at that person and you go, yeah, okay. But no one can, right? Like, no matter what advice that you get given from most people, especially family members, I guess, it's so hard. You don't really take it on board in the way, you don't take it as gospel, which is strange. And even like friends who console you or whatever, they might give you advice, but you still have to learn it for yourself for it to stick. And I think that's something that I wish we could change about the hard coding of people, right? Because we could advance so much quicker if we just knew everything. Dan.
It's kind of like anti-cheat, you know. It's like in anti-cheat, it's like such a difficult situation because you can try to like prepare and so on, but there's going to be shit that happens that you just have to react to, and then you have to figure out, okay, this is what's happening. I'm experiencing how shit this is. Now I have to okay, the analogy doesn't quite hold up, but you kind of get what I mean. Like a necessity has to be created. It's like marketing. That's why marketing's so effective. You create a necessity for an individual, and now you can sell to them because you have the answer. And without having a need to do something, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about the path of least resistance. It's very difficult to convince a human being to do something if there isn't a significant need for that thing to be done. It's just very, very difficult. So, and that's like one of the things like you learn as you get older, and that's how you have more control, I guess, over your destiny, is that you, in understanding more of the nature of yourself and human beings through experience, you can start to like hack the system a little bit and like I was talking about before, like approach is important, but you can't have a good approach if you don't have knowledge. And so you have to realize that you need a good approach, and then to do that you need knowledge. Then you need to know what knowledge to get and then when to find that, and then it's like a huge process just to try to like get that wisdom and transfer it into an actionable benefit in your life. So it's a whole fucking thing there.
Yeah,
it's a whole process.
I like that though, because that's a very it's a really good way of looking at it, right? Because for me, I think up until this point, I've never thought about getting to the end goal. I've always thought about, well, this is what I'm not happy with, or this is what I want to change. How do I change it? Let's change it, as opposed to how do we change it, or what causes that. And something recently, like when it was probably the last 6 months, I'd say I was maybe a little bit more, probably the last year since my grandma passed away. That happened just before Stockholm last year, right? I had a pretty good relationship with my grandma when I was a kid. I was the favorite. I was the first. I was the only boy for like 12 years or something ridiculous, and she spoiled me rotten, right? But then when I moved and I lived away from home and stuff, I had no idea the situation. It's so far away, right? She got sick. She fell. She hit her head. She ended up in hospital. My mum called me crying, saying she had bleeding on the brain or something along those lines. But I didn't know how to deal with that situation, because it was like just before the event, and then when she was in hospital, she wasn't dead. They were like, yeah, we got her here. She might be okay. The doctor's saying, there's a chance. We'll have to monitor her. And I was like, well, I can fly home right now, or in the next few days I fly to Stockholm for this event. And I was really conflicted on what to do, because my grandma, if she woke up and I was there, she'd go, what the fuck are you doing? Well, first of all, my grandma wouldn't swear at me. She'd be very happy to see me, but she'd be like, why are you here? Like, you came home because I had an accident. Like, what are you doing, right? But I kind of did the selfish choice, which was not to go home. And then since then, like, I've kind of just been, I guess, pushing the negative emotion down the road, and that made me like a very hardened, callous type of person. I wasn't looking from other people's perspectives, and that's something that when we're here for the miners, I was talking to Sue a lot, and she was giving me a lot of good advice. And I'm trying to look at things from like other people's perspectives as opposed to just the one that I immediately have, because even at the end, I might be right with the way, like, I might have the right end, but I got there wrong, or the way that they were getting to their point was the confusing part, right? Like, that's where our miscommunication breakdown. They started at a different point than I did, so we meet at a different point. And that's something which I haven't even put stock in at all in like the last year, which is ridiculous. That is like a basic human concept. Like, I don't even know how I forgot to do that. That's how much of a snowball this last like year has been. And it's kind of like I had 3 weeks off to wake up to that, and now I'm like, oh, okay. But the thing is, I look back at it and I go, well, I still had all these really good times. Like, I did all these great events. I remember it all, and it was fantastic. But I just know now that I feel like I wasn't in my happiest state then, which is strange, because how do you quantify that as well? Like, how can you go, yeah, at this period of time I was happier than this period of time? Because you're comparing 2 different stages of like life with each other, right? So that in itself is another thing which is super difficult to put your finger on or even define. But I love the way that you're talking about like preparing yourself, and that you need to have a reason to do something. Like, you need a strongly vetted reason. It can't be like, yeah, getting in shape would be good because, I might feel a little bit better. No, it needs to be like, I bought some scales. The scales arrived. I jumped on the scales. I went, fuck me. When did I put on 5 extra kilos? And then I started hitting the gym every single day and eating better, right? Seeing the extra 5 kilos was enough to kick me in the ass. But realistically, I look at somebody like you, for example, who fitness is a big part of your life, right? But that's a priority of your life. I need to turn that thing that I'm doing now to get back to where I was into a priority, so it becomes a focus, and then that becomes a hobby. Like you co-cast with James, obviously, and everyone knows James has more hobbies than anyone I've ever met in my entire life. But I think it's great because he has so many interests, right? He has so many things that interest him that maybe he's not feeling scuba diving one day, but he's feeling keyboards, right? So he always has something that he can pivot to, whereas I haven't given myself anything to pivot to. And that, I guess, is part of the tools that you're talking about, finding those tools and then learning how to use them in the best possible way. And these are just the basics of life. And that's what these players, to bring it back into Counter-Strike, are being given, I think. Because they have all the experience behind them, because they have the professional organizations, they're being shown from a position of, you get paid to do this and there's a lot of money behind this, so guess what, this is already, what we're telling you is valid, right? Like it validates itself. It's their livelihood, it's their income, it's all these things. And they have these people who are saying, well, if you want to keep doing this, you have to do these things. They're learning almost by force, right? They're learning, okay guys, well, we're gonna exercise today, you're gonna be up, we're gonna be at the gym, we're gonna eat better, we're gonna do this, it's gonna make you a better Counter-Strike player. Their goal is to be a better Counter-Strike player. Fitness contributes to that, but realistically, when they're not playing Counter-Strike anymore, I hope that they all keep up the fitness stuff, right? Because that is something which we should all be doing in all of our lives. They're getting some really valuable life tools here from this. Yeah,
it's really amazing. Like I wish this stuff was around when I was playing, but unfortunately Quake was never quite so large, and it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it is like it is a really interesting one too, because I think that is the beauty of competition, is that it puts this. It's like the best and purest form or driver of self-improvement I can possibly think of, just because you find something like Counter-Strike or like whatever it is, and it is the biggest argument, it's the biggest reason to face your weaknesses, the ugly truths about yourself, because you want to win more than anything.
Yeah.
And you'll do anything to win. And so you have to be real with yourself. You have to face the truth. And the people that absolutely crush you, the poetry is that they are like your greatest allies, because they're your greatest friends, because they're showing you, hey, motherfucker, you got to improve this shit. Like here's where you're fucking up, and I'm going to exploit you every single day until you fucking fix it. And then they're going to drive that rage inside of you, and it's going to put fuel in your furnace, because you want to win more than anything else. You want to achieve, and that's such and that's what's really interesting, because as you say, like when that hunger gets tapered or taken away for some reason, that's when you really start to see players fall off. And it's not because they're too old. It's just a matter of hunger, and that can be because of all different reasons.
Priority shifts. That's one reason. I think just to give an example to what you were saying about your enemy being one of your biggest allies, I think for Liquid, Astralis is that, right? And that's why if that does become a really cool back and forth rivalry, it could go on for a long period of time. That has so much to it. For those of you who aren't aware, who are listening, in 2018, Liquid lost everything to Astralis, and now this year they're the best team in the world. So I think that that right there is a perfect example of what you were talking about. But it's all just a fucking mystery, Dan.
It's interesting, because so Anders is somebody that's obviously I think he's doing a great job with the social media, and he's done a great job in really kind of like what we're talking about, like hitting this point in his life where he's like, it's like, shit, I gotta change some things. And for him, obviously, it was like losing weight, getting in better shape, and through that he found found more strength to really do and express himself in the world in more ways, which would be fulfilling and be a more true kind of expression of who he is. Because like James, James putting out loads of stuff and being passionate about things, ultimately all we are is our passions, because that is the purest representation of our values, and how our values therefore manifest into the world, and that's for everybody to look at and everyone to see, and that's your identity, that's who you are. And so the more in touch you are with your passions, the more you're working with them, ultimately the more fulfilled you can be. And as you say though, you struggle it being one thing for too long as well, because that does have its downfalls, and human beings aren't so simple as that. We're so multifaceted that, and like again, James is a great example, because he is someone that has found so many different passions in so many different areas, and it's so important. And speaking of Anders, one quote that Anders really likes, and I also like, we kind of have a shared appreciation of this, is this guy does a lot of podcasts and so on. He's an ex-Navy SEAL. You've probably heard of his name if you've spoken to Anders, called Jocko Willink.
Yes.
And I've actually read a couple of his books. He's fantastic stuff. But he has this amazing quote, which sounds like a contradiction, an oxymoron, which is discipline equals freedom. And it's a really interesting idea because I'm trying to, like, for some reason came up to this stranger on the plane on the way over here, and I was like explaining it to her, and she was like, I don't understand, like, what does that mean? And I was saying to her, like, when you find like your passions and which is effectively the most fulfilling thing in your life, and you wake up and you're giving into the path of least resistance, where maybe you sleep a little bit, or maybe you're a little bit lax on what you eat, or maybe you're just not quite as on point or driven, then all of a sudden you're not as free because you're not as free to express those passions in the world. Yeah. But if you make the time for them, if you do the hard work, then eventually it just drives itself, and that discipline it just happens. It's just not even a question anymore, because you just care about those things so much, and you get into the habit of just doing those things. And now what you're doing is just spending all your time doing the things in the world that matter the most to you as a human being, that express your identity and fulfillment like at its maximal potential, as opposed to just kind of giving into all the easy kind of flaws in our psychology, which, I mean, again, we're both getting kind of older now. We've kind of experienced a lot of like, we talked about the loneliness and other stuff that like just these so many fucked up things. You're like, I don't understand why I'm like this. And so we can't just let our brains just do what it wants to do. Otherwise we get fucked.
Yeah, I think that's another layer to that as well, right? Of why we're like we are. That's another one which starts to get like a prickly one when you think about it. Like the more you think about like things that affected your life, it becomes really, it becomes, you start to look at situations that you've had and you go, fuck, like when I was a teenager, when I was a kid, like this is how this affected me, and this is how I deal with it now. Like, because at the time, we're not as cognizant as we are now, right? Like back then, we're not thinking, well, how do we make sure we don't feel this way anymore? Like we don't think that. We just kind of do something which eventually stops that feeling or makes a different feeling happen. And we're kind of, just trial and error back then. Whereas now we have a better grasp, there's better things at our, I guess, availability. But that's the discipline one. That's legitimately something which I wish I could fix, right? Like, you asked me, it all would feed into one thing. You asked me like what I want to do and stuff. Well, more Counter-Strike related stuff from my own person would be the first place. Like what you're doing right now is an example of something which is, you have to be disciplined to do this. You have to bring the gear, you have to set it up, and you have to do it.
Yeah, I wasn't too stoked of like spending the break, and I'm happy that you're spending the break with me, talking to me. But yeah, I have failed so many times. This wasn't a thing where I'm like, this is like surely the easiest most foolproof way to do stuff and find consistency and frequency, but it's still very hard.
Still hard, right?
It's still hard, yeah.
Because it's not only difficult to just do it, then you still have to put it out there, and then it's the feedback of it, right? Like, I understand that things just don't blow up overnight, right? And what we do here, we jump on screen and there's 100,000 people watching. Well, I never consider the number, right? I never go out there thinking about those cameras. That's I think one of the things which I think that people at home maybe don't realize. Our job, right? The reason that it's so easy for me to go out there and talk about Counter-Strike is because I go out there and talk about the one thing I know better than anything else in the world. I'm not going out there presenting myself for a camera. Sure, do I, make sure I trim my beard and get a haircut and brush my teeth and, do all these things to make sure I don't look like a homeless person? Yeah, because I want to present myself in the best possible way. But realistically for me, when I go out there, I get a chance to make some jokes, have some fun, and talk about some Counter-Strike and hopefully teach you guys something. But I want to do more things with the discipline that you're talking about, because we do have significant amount of time where we have to, be here to do this job. We also have a significant amount of downtime. You had a 5 hour, were you with the other guys with a 5 hour delay of flight? Yeah. So you guys had like a 5 hour delay in an airport.
Sucked.
But what we do when things, not what we do, what I do, and probably Alex and Henry when things suck, is we'll just sit there and we'll just listen to music or whatever while those things suck. But things what we could do in 5 hours, realistically, you could do a lot of things. Like I have a H6 as well. We could probably, do a podcast in 5 hours pretty easily. Like there's so many I could do. I haven't done invoices in 6 months, right? Like that's a discipline thing. Why have I not sent an invoice? Yeah,
that's a long time.
Why have I not sent an invoice? I can't tell you.
I know that feeling. I know that exact feeling. It doesn't make sense. No. It doesn't make sense. It just
but it sits here. Like I can feel it. I can feel that feeling, and I'm like, I'm gonna get paid. I've already done the work. Why am I not sending an invoice? Like, what are you doing, dude? Like, this is literally the only part of the job that is the part that most people would consider good. But like, I'm like, this is the hard part. This is the paperwork. This is the chasing people up. This is the asking for the 7th time where the money is. You know, I don't want to go through that, and I also don't want to pay someone to be my agent to do that. So I guess we'll just go long periods of time without being paid. But that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is something which, honestly, and this is probably why I haven't done it yet, it will take me 20 minutes. It will take me 20 minutes to go through, check the dates, put my rates in, and send it. That's why I haven't done it. It's because I'm a lazy cunt. Can we say cunt on the podcast?
Oh yeah. You can say whatever you want.
Cool. Yeah, but I think that's it. I think the lazy and the discipline are tied together, and I think that if I don't carry around this feeling with me, then I'll carry around a feeling of nothing, and I think I'm scared of what that feeling of nothing feels like. I think it feels like what I had last night when I was in bed trying to get to sleep. It's just my brain going 1,000,000 miles a minute. And I didn't stop on one thing. Like, it just kept going. I'm like, why am I not asleep? The Eiffel Tower is pretty cool. Why am I not asleep? Well, let's check my phone again. Why am I not asleep? You know, like it just everything just kept happening. And anyway, mouse sports.
No, yes. We have like 10 minutes left on the hard drive. I feel like we might as well just max it out at this point.
Let's do it.
But it's a really interesting point, actually, because it's something like that I struggle with too. I don't even know how to explain it. I'm really introspective and analytical about myself, but I just don't get it. One thing though that I have begun to be more sensitive to again is a nagging feeling, and I've begun to understand, like, if I have a nagging feeling, do you know what I mean? Like that there's something, and you like, you know, you should do something. There's something in the back of your mind, like, but you're like, you know what? I'm really tired. I've been working a lot. I've been traveling a lot. Like that, you know, you'll find all these kinds of reasons not to do it, and I've been trying to use that nagging feeling as a reference point to just shut all that part of my brain off and just like go and just start doing whatever that thing is. And sometimes I get some momentum from that because I'm like, holy shit, that felt good, and that didn't actually take me much effort. I answered those few emails. Oh, that felt good. Well, if I answer another one, okay, nice. Okay, let's work on this item on the to-do list. Now I'm organizing myself. And I'm very disorganized. There's a huge problem that I have, and so that's kind of been helpful for me recently. And the other thing too is kind of having actually stuff like doing the podcast or the other projects I'm doing, because it's like such a big deal in terms of my passions and my fulfillment. Like when I wanted to do the podcast, I wanted to do it for, like, I realized that, oh shit, this would be a really good thing for me to do. It plays to some of my strengths. I think this would be really awesome. No one's doing stuff quite like this. Mm-hmm. And now I've created this need for myself, because I'm like, I'm filling a gap in an area which I think is exciting. I listen to so many podcasts. Now all that's in my mind is this nagging feeling like, you have to do that. And every time I'm not doing it, I feel like shit in the back of my mind. So I'm like playing off of this nagging feeling again, because I've created a better understanding of who I want to be and kind of the vision, I guess. I think that's really like, it goes back to that need thing again, like creating the necessity. And I feel like if I'm a piece of shit that can't, like, let's say, answer the emails or send the invoices or be timely in my responses to emails and stuff, which I'm still working on. So if you listen to this and I haven't responded to your email, I'm sorry. Then I'm like, you know what? I don't just feel like a piece of shit. I feel like a piece of shit that's not going to be the kind of person that I want to be in 6 months, and I can't bear the thought of not being that person that I want to be. And that kind of vision, like having a vision, has helped me a lot. So I don't know if there's any wisdom there, but that's been helping me recently.
Especially the nagging feeling and shutting that part off, right? I think that really resonated with me just then, because what I do is I keep the negative feeling, but I use it as my shield. It's like, I have this thing to do. Yeah. This is my thing that I have to do. I feel that, like, if I clean my schedule and I have nothing else that I have to do, that point right there is where I go to myself, oh shit, now we have to start. Like, now I have to actually start doing things, because invoicing is just part of my everyday life, right? Like, it should be. Like, that's this what I consider I do now with all the Counter-Strike work. That's my staple. That's my staple year. Everything else, the ancillary stuff, the extra stuff, the stuff for me, that is all on top. And this is why fuck it, let's do the invoices right now. Let's get them done. Let's knock them out.
You know what? It's interesting too, because I just had the thought as well that, like, some of that, it does act. It's like you're saying it acts as a shield is, like, actually kind of true, because it kind of blocks your workflow to a degree where you don't have to find that thing to do that would take a lot of effort. Like maybe it's like actually hiding a feeling that you're like, fuck, I actually want time. I'll have no excuse now not to do this other thing that I think that I should do, whether maybe for you it's like fitness or like whatever else it might be. I'm not sure. Yeah. But that could be part of it too.
Yeah, so that I think if we get rid of this feeling, then maybe we'll see what happens. We can do an update. We'll do a podcast before the major ends, and we'll say, hey, Chad, you do your invoices yet? And the answer will probably still be no, but at least we thought about it, and that's the main thing. Do you want to end with some Counter-Strike? How many minutes we got left?
Right, so we got
3 minutes?
8 minutes and 44 seconds left.
Okay. Have you played much of the new Vertigo?
I played not the new Vertigo, but I think that from the beginning, I looked at the map and I felt like it was going to be a piece of shit, and I still feel that way, unfortunately.
So the new version, right? And when we finish this, we'll have a listen. But I think I probably played 40 matchmaking games or games in general on this new Vertigo. And of course, it's not a competitive environment like we're seeing right now, but it's enough to give me a grasp of how the map can play. And these new updates with the ladder room and the way that they've changed the B lobby experience, it's going to change the way this map plays. You can fight for territory over towards the A ramp now. All of these adjustments have really made me look at it as possibly a map that could be competitive. And we're getting the first one here at the major right now, ladies and gentlemen. This is during Malta Sports versus G2, the third map of their best of 3. And I'm telling you, if this plays out like I think it can, this could be one of the best maps in the pool. Like I'm not pulling any punches there.
Ooh, wow, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, I'm very open to that. For me, actually, it was kind of sad because when like the first couple months of Vertigo coming out, I like one team that stood out like just beyond head and shoulders above everybody else was actually Optic with MSL.
Yeah.
And the kind of stuff that he was doing was just so mad. And I was really sad that I didn't actually get to see them play it on LAN against anybody. I still haven't seen that. I don't know if that's even happens. So I'm looking forward to seeing that because that's the thing as well. Like it's like the thing we were talking about before about like talking about the balance of the game and maybe things aren't as exciting with the way the economy is, but also the fact that hey, if we don't actually have like 8 teams in the world that are as good as, are of the level of an Astralis and a Liquid, we won't really quite have the test and the kind of data we really need to see if it's in the place that it should be. Because we have to think about the long term. We can't just make decisions on the short term, because then you have really big issues, and you gotta let the players solve things. And so maybe it turns out and it works.
Well, Valve obviously take a lot of the data that comes in from the matchmaking games, right? And the problems that you have at a pro level may not be the same problems you have at the amateur casual level, but they will identify themselves probably in a similar fashion, right? Like if one part of the map is just inherently more popular, whether it's because you can execute. Here's how this map would go in the old version. Teams would go towards A, they'd execute on the A bomb site, the CTs would play retake, they'd smoke off the Ts, it'd be a clusterfuck, people would be spamming, nading, smokes everywhere, right? The way that this map can probably play now is the CTs can play transitional defense over towards the A ramp and the B position of the map. The Ts will have to expend utility and numbers to take control of that. If they win that fight, they can set up to execute, but the CTs can reaggress, right? That happens now on both extremes of the map. But my point about the amateur and the professional is, in professional play, okay, you can't just run up A ramp, right? But in amateur play, you can. But the end goal probably of the old Vertigo was still A, right? So the heat map data or the data they have is still teams ending on A. It doesn't. So we're solving similar symptoms, but we're never going to be able to, until the players actually have an open discourse with Valve, work out what the best. It's probably good if they don't have an open discourse about the maps. I don't know if I want the people competing on them to be necessarily directly in control of how the changes happen. Maybe some form of an advisory board, because if you let them design the map, then whoever designed it is kind of the person who understands how it plays the best, or in theory, right? So maybe there needs to be some trade-off there. But I think that you're right. The players do essentially need to work it out, but Valve still need to offer them something that's playable. And I think we're at the point now where it's playable. With this ladder room, the fakes that we can see come in could be a pretty cool element. What do you think, though, about the map pool situation? Do you think one map should go out after every major, or one map every year?
So I'm a fan of new maps. I think there is a lot of issues in a game like Counter-Strike, though, with new maps, and that's, it's stuff like you introduce a new map, there needs to be preparation time, because you need to have this period, this kind of like buffer period where people get fucked for a month by the one-way smokes that can just break around.
Yeah.
That someone has nutted out and they found some one-ways and they win an important best of 1 or best of 3 because of it. Like, that's not going to be good for the scene. So stuff like that is a problem.
If you enjoy this episode and you want to support the podcast,
willy-nilly switch maps in and out in an ecosystem that doesn't allow for teams to play them. Like, Like in my
hearing
perfect
feedback,
world, Valve
whether it be
has a little bit more
some
like
production
coordination
feedback,
with the
if I'm
TOs,
messing
TOs
something
work
up on the
together
technical
I
side
don't think
of
it's ever going
things.
to happen like
Or
that.
maybe it's a guest
but
that
that's
you
the only
want to
world
hear
where I
from.
would see
Or
it
maybe a
be
topic that
better
hasn't
to
been
have
covered yet
more
that
than
you'd really
one
like
map
to
a
hear about
year.
as well.
And in that scenario,
Anything
the way
like
that
that,
I'd like
maybe
to see
just
it is
some questions,
you
whatever
have
it is.
2 predefined
Send
major
me
seasons that
a
Valve have
comment
set,
on YouTube.
and
Lots of people like to do that.
You
Or
get rid of the
perhaps
minors.
what you
Instead,
can do is
you
hit me up on
the
Instagram as
TOs
well.
The TOs run
DDK
leagues and
Esports is my
tournaments
Instagram
that
channel.
contribute
You can
points
just
to
send a DM
the
there.
various
Like the
regions,
DPC
and then that kind of qualifies you into the major.
Now,
and you have
if you want to go a step
tournament
further,
like this, and then
patreon.com/DDK
you have a
Esports
month
is how you can contribute
that is a
financially
transfer window for
to
players,
the
and
growth
it's
of
a
this
break,
podcast.
and the new map gets
And
introduced.
I think that really
and
about covers
then-
it.
So people
So
can fuck
thank you
around
very much for
during that
listening.
month. They
I
want to
look
take a
forward to
break, and then they
making
come
the
back,
next
and boom,
podcast
you got the regular
Cheers.
programming again in the lead up to the next major,
Yeah.
and then same thing. And that's if you're going to introduce more than one map a year, that's how I would like to see it done. But it's a very difficult one. It's a very difficult one.
It's not. There's not going to be a science to it. I think while the calendar is as chaotic as what it is. This is the new ladder room I was talking about right there. See that wall where to the left. That's completely wall bangable, right? So if you're the CT and you get to that toolbox position first, you can spam through that wall to the T coming up the ladder.
Cool.
You're going to be looking. You're going to be looking at I hope these teams have done a lot of homework on this, because there's so many cool things you can do, man. From that ladder room, if you establish a position there, you can throw a bunch of different smokes onto this A bomb site. One guy can throw the gap smoke in the wall and then go late mid. You can do really easy mid. There's so much stuff. Fuck it, we're almost out of time. Let's watch.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for talking to me. We went deep on a variety of subjects, and you know what? This is just day 2. So if you're down for any more, then I'm down as well. We can be accountability partners. I'm going to check on you and the invoices, and you can make sure I record at least a couple more podcasts this major.
All right. Sounds
All
good.
right. Cheers, man.
Bye.
For the journey.
Easy.